Blog Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, we are live on air. Let's talk with Blog Talk Radio. I'm your host Melissa, and tonight I've got Randy Davis co-hosting with me. We have a very special guest tonight, Mr. Robert Baty, the boss man.
The boss.
He's here with us. Yeah, he's with us here on the studio phone line. Welcome to the show, Robert. We are so glad that
Thank
you're
you
here.
very much.
Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about why did Lee Kenworthy sue Robert Baty in federal court. Folks, there's been a lot of stuff and a lot of different cases that's out there on the internet, but this one is starts off with a standoff with the police, and it happened on Memorial Day, May 28th, 2018. But since that time, Mr. Baty has uncovered quite a bit of stuff that makes this case extremely interesting. Robert, can you take us back to the day of the standoff and tell us, our listeners, a little bit about what happened and how you got involved in this and what you're interested in the case?
The standoff was on Memorial Day 2018 in New Jersey. It involved Lee Kenworthy, his girlfriend Samantha Brown, and Lee's two children who were at his deceased grandmother's house when apparently a family member called in for a welfare check or some report that caused the Child Protective Services to show up, and when Lee would not cooperate, the police were called. Before we get into further details about all of that, I'd like to explain a little bit of the context as to why that event attracted my attention.
Okay.
That was in 2018, May of 2018. But I first became associated or aware of this movement across the country involving anti-child protective services activity back in 2016, late in the year of 2016. Before that time, I had no idea what was going on in that movement. Excuse me. My main interest, my number one case that I've followed for years and years has been Kent Hovind, who is a fundamentalist, temperamental, chicken-eating, tax-cheating Baptist preacher. And back in 2016, he had been released from prison and moved to Alabama and started building his retirement home and amusement park and so-called science center on 145 acres that he managed to get somebody to finance for him. And one of his people, a guy named Brady Byram, known to be a practicing sovereign citizen, got involved in a child custody case in Alabama. And one of Kent's handlers thought that was such a big deal, he went on YouTube and made known what previously had been secret. Brady had been meddling secretly on behalf of his parents in Alabama to try and get their child back using sovereign citizen techniques. And so there was this big YouTube show, which I happened to pick up on because I follow Kent Hovind's case, and they were bragging on Brady for secretly meddling in this Alabama case and going after the state of Alabama for $1 billion.
Wow.
So because it was a Hovind-related situation, I got interested and started following it and reporting on it, and a lot of people seemed to be interested, as I was, in what I was doing with that. And we followed that case throughout the next couple of years. Ultimately, the parents' rights were terminated, and the child was successfully adopted. And that was early in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, of course, I became aware of other cases and similar cases, and all of a sudden it's Memorial Day 2018, and the standoff with Kentworthy shows up on my monitor. And so I picked up on that, and that's what started my involvement in reporting on that case and following it over the last 2.5 years now. And, there's a lot of similarities between the two as far as situations involving the anti-child welfare people, the sovereign citizen people, the mentally ill people, and what they do in the context of what might be needed in dealing with child welfare cases.
Mm-hmm.
So, ultimately, on Memorial Day 2018, after a number of hours of Lee Kenworthy acting up and trying to play the tough guy, he decided, given the choices, he would voluntarily commit himself for evaluation rather than be arrested. So his children were taken and placed with a relative, and he went off to the mental facility. And the rest, they say, is history. And there's a lot of history for those that want to dig into the details of that. And as far as the title of this show goes, one of the things that happened during the course of time is that Lee got irritated at me and some other people involved and filed a lawsuit against us personally in federal court. I think it was summer of 2019 that he filed that document. And after 6 or 8 months, it was dismissed for his failure to state a claim on which relief could be granted, which is typical in a lot of federal cases. But one of the things I have found out, probably should have known it before, but it seems to be a recent revelation to me that I hadn't noticed earlier, is that he had filed his federal case against us pro se, without a lawyer, and he asked the court to waive the filing fees. So when you waive those filing fees, when the court waives the filing fees, and you're considered a pauper, what the court does is exercise its own discretion in looking at your case and deciding whether it's ripe for moving forward and being prosecuted.
Mm-hmm.
And in Lee's case, they did that and found out that there's no there. And so Lee never was able to even serve notice of the suit formally to any of us defendants.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's obvious we found out about it without him having to do that, he never officially was able to serve anybody, and the court, on its own initiative, said this ain't going nowhere, and so it was dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
And he has not tried further that I know of to prosecute the case. And so that's what that was all about. And he also, of course, he had some state litigation as well as other federal litigation involving his case against the Bergen County Housing Authority, where he actually collected a tidy little sum as a nuisance settlement, from what I can tell, and then a case against the Lyndhurst Police Department for the wrongful death of his wife, which he tried to prosecute by himself, tried to get some big-name attorneys to help him out, couldn't do it, and ultimately that case was also dismissed. That's a general overview, and his kids had never been returned. They were placed with family. He got into some legal trouble, and he's now a fugitive from justice, and is somewhere maybe down in Florida, living on the street or somewhere. The details are unknown, and he may have had his parental rights terminated by now as well.
Wow, I got a question. Whatever happened to Sam? Does anybody know what happened to Sam? I mean, she seemed like, I don't know, she was suffering from Stockholm syndrome or something from at the beginning, and then all of a sudden I saw that she was going back to her parents or her family, and then she was just gone. Do we ever know what happened to her, or did she ever emerge?
She's got a story of her own, and you know, it's a story yet to tell, but she got hooked up with Lee, involved in his legal problems and charges against her. I don't know that they've all been resolved yet, but her mother came to her rescue and was able to successfully rescue her and take her to California to live with her and resolve her legal problems and move on with her life and cut all ties to Lee Kenworthy. It may be that she'll never be willing to openly tell the story of what all her involvement was, and there may be some good legal reasons for that, but that's what's happened to her. Interestingly enough, that leads us into some other details that come to mind that from the Memorial Day incident, the reason it got so much attention on Memorial Day is some middle-aged woman from New Jersey, for reasons that may not be entirely clear, but she was tipped off to get down there and start broadcasting this on Facebook. So she went to the location and started blasting away on Facebook. And subsequent to that, two other women show up to cheerlead and promote Lee Kenworthy's storyline. That was Frances Amato from New York and Jamie Johnson from Indiana. And the woman that was on the street that started the broadcast, of course, is Sharon Kronkite. She's got various names. In different contexts, you call her by any number of names. I think she prefers Shara Michelle, but Sharon Kronkite has become one of her aliases. Maybe I originated that, I don't know. But anyway, you have Sharon and Jamie and Frances and Samantha Brown, Lee's girlfriend, that's now in California starting a new life. And that leaves behind Sharon, Jamie, and Frances, who are still hung up in what they do in this and anti-child welfare movement activity and related activities. They're having a little more trouble maybe than Samantha is right now in deciding what future they're going to have with all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had wondered, I had wondered if any of these people knew. At the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about any of them, but I had wondered, did they know? So they didn't even, until Lee pulled this Memorial Day standoff looking thing, and cops surrounded them, then none of these people had gotten together before. They weren't known to each other before, and they hadn't done anything together before, is what you're saying. Because I didn't know that. I thought they kind of knew each other.
I didn't see them together before then, but Jamie apparently was in some kind of business operations with Lee, offering services to people that wanted help with their child custody cases. And I think Francis Amato was also involved to some extent, maybe independently, but with the same type of deal. I think all three of them, Jamie and Francis and Lee, set up their own supposed foundations under which to operate, as if that would provide them with some cover and maybe some legitimacy in trying to bamboozle people in need of child custody assistance.
Mm-hmm. And that would make sense, and I'll tell you this, Melissa, because when we dug in and we started researching, this is a strange thing. So that was Memorial Day. Okay, they had to have known each other. I'll tell you why. At least why I think. It may be circumstantial, but I don't think so. But when we dug in, if this was Memorial Day of 2018 when that video came out, when we went back and researched Jamie Johnson, Francesca Amato, and Lee Kenworthy, all three started foundations attempting to get nonprofit status, but they all three started foundations in January 2018. All three of them, within days of each other, they all started the same type of foundation. And I had heard before that Fran and Jamie were somehow involved. And the only time I ever spoke to Lee Kenworthy, so everybody knows, I had called him out, and I was like, man, I got a woman that says she sent you money and you actually signed a contract. And I had the contract, and it looked like it was like a lawyer agreement to represent that an attorney would do. And he actually had it all filled out, documented, signed, and took money from these people. So I still don't know if all three of them were doing business together, or if they were three separate entities going under the same kind of an attempt to get money for child protective services, advocacy, or whatever they were doing. But I find it really odd that all three of them would have formed foundations in the same month of January 2018 if they didn't know one another, and then they later all get together. And, of course, we've seen, I made memes about it with the three Charlie's Angels, we call them. They're up there pretending they've got guns and they're posing for pictures. But you can see what happens in the end whenever this foolishness happens is they all three have ran into nightmares as a result now.
Yeah. But now, Jamie Johnson has separated herself from that group since that time. But let me ask you about Lee's wife.
Shailene.
Shailene, yes. Can you elaborate on a little bit about what happened after the standoff? And
I'll try to briefly again. I say I'm a generalist. A lot of people are more familiar with the details, especially from an extemporaneous basis. To dig into the details, I need time to sit and look and research stuff. But basically, Lee was married to Shailene Sang, I think is her maiden name, and the two kids involved in the standoff were her two kids. She died in 2016, 2 years before the standoff, under rather suspicious circumstances. The immediate physical cause of her death appeared to have been an asthma attack, and it took place at an apartment from which Lee and her were being evicted. They were in the process, supposedly, of moving out. Something had been going on between Lee and her, and he was actually under domestic violence charges that were coming up for action. And she winds up dead in this apartment they were moving out of.
Mm-hmm.
And
was that domestic violence action against him? Did Shailene file that? Was she the plaintiff in that?
Again, I'm not aware, just offhand, of the details. It's been discussed quite a bit recently in social media. Apparently, there was an event. Police were called and charges were filed. Some people may dispute whether Shailene would have participated in the prosecution or not, but their history relevant to all of this stuff goes back maybe at least 10 years. They had a pretty rocky road they were going down involving drugs, to domestic violence, child welfare services. Their 2 children may not have spent half of that 10 years with them. Child Protective Services was in and out of their lives, the children spending time with relatives when they would be removed. And there's a lot of material that's been recently released that gives some insight into that history and her death and the situation surrounding it. And it's quite a sad tale, perhaps all too typical of what we see in our society when it comes to drugs and domestic violence. It can be argued, I suppose, that she didn't want out, she's just happy where she was, but that's not the conclusion I come to. I rather believe Lee Kenworthy had exploited and manipulated her for years, and she was looking for a way out and couldn't find it. And Lee, in my opinion, was actively involved in the circumstances which led up to her death, and that's why I have proposed that Lee Kenworthy killed Shailene Kenworthy. He proposes that it was the police that killed her. And so that's an open question for those that want to look into the matter. Lee Kenworthy blames it on the police. He had a state wrongful death suit filed, which didn't go anywhere, and the federal suit, which I mentioned earlier, which didn't go anywhere. That may not be conclusive as to whether the police were responsible. You can draw your own conclusion and maybe review those records. And as a counterpoint to that, I proposed, when I first got into the case and looked at the basic information, that Lee Kenworthy is responsible for her death through the long history of domestic violence and exploitation and the way he compelled her to live their lives. And there may actually have been some more direct activities between him and Shailene in the 12 or 24 hours before she died that brought on her breathing problems, which he let manifest itself into her winding up unconscious on the floor when the police and the medical people arrived. It was too late to bring her back. And, you know, she was
I was reading that today, and it was
controversy
really
created.
weird. Yeah, that was really strange. I had never seen it before. I never dug real deep into what happened to her. I always felt like you do. I felt there was something suspicious about Kentworthy himself. But reading it, Melissa, when you read it, it sounds like they were being evicted. They had a U-Haul truck outside. He senses she's somehow struggling with her breathing, but they were arguing. There was an open domestic violence, either charge or order or both. Something was hanging on. But he says that he starts to move the stuff himself, and she can rest, and then he has her get in the truck, and then he has her get back in the house. It's really fishy. And then all of a sudden she can't breathe, and he contacts, I guess EMS, and they come out, and then she's laying there and can't breathe. But it's really suspicious. If he had a truck there, why didn't he just take her right on to the hospital? Why didn't he get some sort of help? Why didn't she get a nebulizer again? Because he goes, there's a lot of details in there. And if I had to bet, I would say that he may have not intentionally did it. I don't know. But I think that he played a part in her demise because things had went downhill. They were being thrown out. He's mad. He obviously is a madman, which always baffled me, no matter how crazy the guy is. Anybody could see it. And other than Sharon Michelle and Jamie and Francis Amato, I haven't seen anybody standing up for Lee. There hasn't been, when you look at this, it's like everybody else can look at it, and after a few minutes of seeing him on the street in Florida or whatever else he's doing, you know that the guy's a lunatic. I mean, there's nothing he says that's credible. So I never understood why this sheriff jumped in there and he wanted to promote and advocate for him, do interviews with him. At one time I figured he's probably doing her too because he had some kind of mental control. It was like either Jim Jones or Charles Manson, how these women would just be around him and they would protect him. And we're all looking at it going, what in the world? This is a madman. Why would you even be around him? Why would you feel safe around him? I never understood what the allure was that made others want to come in and somehow salvage this train wreck of Lee Kenworthy in the first place.
Well, and there seems to be a big online argument as to, her death. Some are saying, she just died as an asthma attack, and then others are kind of arguing that she died from delayed treatment, which resulted in her asthma killing her. So there's a big thing that's argument that's going online, actually on Char's page, Sharon Kronkite's page. I'll just say it like that. And people are having a lot to say about that.
One of the characteristics of the movement, as I will refer to it, is a suspicion of anything to do with the government, and they promote such ideas as don't open the door, record everything, and don't cooperate. And that was manifest to some degree when Shailene...
Sorry.
Okay. When Shailene died, Lee Kenworthy was not cooperative with the police and the EMS. So he presented his own delay tactics. If she could have been saved, he was going to make sure they didn't have time. There may not have been anything by the time they got there that could have saved her, but he ran interference that slowed the response time once they got there. And this is what you see throughout the movement. They counsel people, don't open your door, record everything, give them a hard time. They don't have jurisdiction. And this is a sort of situation that can develop. It developed after Shailene's death and on the Memorial Day 2018 standoff. It's reported that Lee lied about the children even being in the house. And, it led into him not wanting to open the door, not wanting to let CPS do a welfare check. So CPS called the police. They didn't want to cooperate with the police. It took them all day before they got to where Lee had to make a choice. He could be arrested or he could voluntarily commit himself for mental evaluation. He chose the mental evaluation.
Yeah.
And in that connection, too, it's important to understand that they were in a house that had been his grandmother's, who, interestingly enough, also died under suspicious circumstances, where Lee was her caregiver.
Oh, wow.
We may never get that resolved either. You make up your own mind as to how suspicious that might have been, but the record indicates, and Lee has even explained it, I think, in a recent post, telling it from his side of things, but I found it interesting that Lee admitted that his grandmother, who was suffering from dementia, was taking a drug that one of the side effects could be it kills you. And she winds up dead, an unattended death, and how convenient, somehow, she wound up leaving her house in New Jersey to Lee Kenworthy, which is where the standoff took place.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So there's actually 2 deaths associated with, at least 2, where Lee plays a starring role, and you form your own conclusions.
Mhm. Wow. Mm.
And
so let me ask you this: some of the stuff
go
that
ahead.
some of the stuff that you, because you've been watching this case for a long time and everything, some of the newer stuff that has come to light, do you feel that maybe that's information that police should maybe investigate or reopen the case? Or, I mean,
well, these days, the law enforcement is under so much limitation and burden. I don't know what the realistic prospects are, but as a casual observer who spent time reviewing these particulars, I think if time and expense were not an issue, both cases could be ones that law enforcement might want to take a closer look at. Unfortunately, prosecutorial discretion and all that stuff, when you go to court, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And so it may be a real tough case to make under the facts as we know them. But I think there's potential there. It may never be realized, but I think it would be worth noting in the public discussion or to run by some prosecutors and at least let them know people are concerned. If you lower the burden of proof just a little from criminal to civil, someone in the family might well, if they had the time and money, they might well prosecute a wrongful death suit against Lee Kenworthy for the death of his grandmother as well as for the death of Shailene. For the record, you get $1 million judgment, you're not going to collect it, but for the record, for those 2 women and their legacies, it might be a profitable exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happened to that house? Didn't he end up losing that house? in the end?
He did sell it and cashed in on it. I think he got $80,000 or something out of it. It's interesting that he got that money from the house and the money from his nuisance settlement from the housing authority in Bergen County, and apparently he didn't have any trouble wasting it away, because he doesn't seem to have much, if any, of it left now.
Mhm.
No, because I see him all the time asking for money, and they were trying to feed a dog he had. I mean, randomly, I just see things pop up because I really didn't care to pay much attention to the guy. I hate it for, the kids, because I do believe he played a part in the death of their mother and, his grandmother. And I think the guy's just a shyster. I just could never figure out. And there were several people pumping this thing. I think it was Attorney Connie Regularly who sent me the link and tagged me and said, you got to go see this, or I wouldn't have even seen the video that Memorial Day. So I go over there to look, and I'm like, oh, my God, they're going to jump through the windows, drag people out, and then it just kept going and going and going. And I'm thinking, it gets to a point where you got to do something. Yeah, video it, use it, whatever, but you can't let them start shooting through the house, and you've told them there's no children in there. That was something I picked up that day. He was making it clear there was no kids in the house, and there was. And the whole thing just went downhill. And those are the kind of cases that when advocates or whatever activists are out there, or reporters like Silly Shara, want to come out, they pick the dumbest shit. I've never understood this. They will pick the very worst just because they're the loudest. They're all over Facebook. They're loud. So let's pick those, and let's use these as the poster child for bad DSS cases. Because there are bad DSS cases. I've seen them. I've watched them. Been in a courtroom. Seen things made up. But that doesn't mean that all DSS cases are bad. There are ones that should be DSS cases, and they're not. That's the other side of it. There's times when DSS doesn't act and a child dies because they didn't take action. There's other times when they take too much of an action. There wasn't a reason to take a child, but they take the child and end up destroying a family that they could have pieced back together or helped to get back on their feet. But the problem lies in these people that go out, and because there's a loud one or somebody who's willing to blurt everything out there, lie, embellish their case, they follow those, and then whenever those cases implode, just like Lee Kenworthy and Arlena Will is another one, they get a lot of attention, but then it's like it makes everybody who's trying to point out an injustice look like we're all crazy as hell. You just look silly. It's like, yeah, that's some of them crazy soft citizens, jokers, and they always fall back on the exact same thing like Baty just said. They fall back on this, you don't, I wouldn't let anybody search my house, my car, or anything else without a search warrant under normal circumstances. But some of these people have been involved, and they already have case plans, and there is jurisdiction, and they can come in your house, and you have to let them in your house. If you don't, you're going to, and there's no reason to stand there in an all-day standoff with kids in the house and cops piling through the windows and put your children in danger. I see that. And this is something that Connie Regularly has been doing lately. Me and her, we've got along before. We bumped heads before. But recently she's been filming little kids and filming everything and just blasting it live to Facebook when you don't have all the facts. You don't know what's going on. And then it makes it harder. It actually makes it harder for everybody else who's doing the right thing and trying to bring about a change to a system that is flawed. It is a flawed system. It is not a perfect science with social services and some of the things they do. And some of the things they do are blatantly unconstitutional. They rip away your rights. But there's a way to fight that without going to the level that Shara and friends even promoted pedophiles. I mean, had them on the video. Pedophiles who pled guilty here in North Carolina, that crazy Brian Robertson, Guilford County, North Carolina, and Ulster County, New York. He was here, and Fran promoted him. Did a live video with him. Oh, he's back with it, and he did this to his own 18-month-old child. Raped a child. He pled guilty, I think, to crimes against nature, and took a 10-year guilty plea. You don't take a 10-year plea to a crime against nature unless you think going to court is really going to put you away forever. Because that is the thing. And she promoted him. David Shore. Fran and Connie did the same thing. I'm pretty sure Shara didn't have anything to do with those, but I don't know. But this crazy Shara, she comes out of the woodwork. She promotes this kind of foolishness. And these people get all hyped up. And they're okay with them using legal agreements and everything else to go out and baffle and basically grift off parents that are afraid, they're scared, their family's torn apart, they're in shame, and they promote them. I just can't, for the life of me, I can't understand why Shara can't pick a winning case and stick with it. And then on the other side of it, just like, nobody out there thinks that I'm in agreement with any of the things that Jamie Johnson has done before, but she did them. She's apparently doing whatever she can to rebuild herself. And here's Shara out there now blasting foolishness that shouldn't be on Facebook that's going to hurt somebody. It's actually hurting her, quote unquote, client's case. I don't understand that, except that she's an attention whore who wanted attention then, ran over and thought she would be the man on the street kind of interview about Lee Kenworthy, and then met him in all these locations at restaurants. And honestly, I don't know of any sane woman who would look at what Lee Kenworthy has put online and what happened that day and the death of his wife and the death of his grandmother and all the other foolishness he's done. I know of no woman that's a mother that would allow him to babysit their dog, much less their child, and yet she goes out there and puts her crazy self right out there with him and promotes him in various locations that I would think, would be dangerous. I'd be terrified if I had a sister or a daughter that was anywhere near this crazy fool.
And I want to point out also that Shara Sawyer has also put false claims out there that the prosecutor confirmed that there was no crimes that were committed by Lee Kenworthy on the Memorial Day standoff in 2018. But she says that, but she's never produced any evidence of the prosecutor ever saying that. And people have been asking her to produce that, and she has not. But go ahead.
Interestingly enough, I just posted a couple of Sharon's old posts about that, which includes two of the prosecutors, or under his name, under his office, posts on Facebook about that. And that's an issue that I thought I had resolved with Sharon a long time ago, but she brought it up today again. She claims the prosecutor confirmed there were no crimes committed by Lee on Memorial Day 2018. And what the prosecutor's statements, which I just posted before this show, reflect, which is my position in denying Sharon's claim, is that they did not file any criminal charges against Lee for anything on Memorial Day 2018, which is a far cry from saying there were no crimes committed. And the context, which we mentioned earlier, but need to maybe emphasize, in my opinion, is that at the end of the day, Lee had a choice to make once they had him out of the house, and they were going to remove him. They were going to take him somewhere. He could go to jail, be arrested, or he could voluntarily commit himself because he was showing signs of mental instability or mental illness. It was his call, and he made the call to be evaluated mentally, and so they didn't charge any didn't file any criminal charges. And so that's what the prosecutor, from the statements I read, the prosecutor's office under the Facebook account said no charges were filed. Shara has been harping, despite having been told before and shown before, she's been harping there were no crimes.
No, and that, you can see what happened there. No prosecutor in his right mind would have tried to prosecute it, because Lee would have never been found competent to stand trial. He was a complete maniac, a mental nutcase all day long. He had a history of it. And then he goes in on a 5150 hold, because I remember all these people were trying to raise bail. Oh, we're raising bail. And I was thinking, how do we know he's even in jail? Nobody at first knew where the guy was. It was pretty obvious to some of us. He's on a 5150 hold somewhere. They've got him jacked up, and then they were giving reports of this from jail, I mean, from mental institutes and everything else, and oh, they're doing him wrong. And the thing is, folks, sometimes some of these things, they seem like, yeah, maybe they're holding somebody in there, but I can tell you, as somebody who was held with no charge and no order, and you're just in there on a secret thing, it's not like you think. You can have people go check it out and film it like my people did and capture that. You can capture it. But in this case, just like many of these, nobody ever did that. Nobody ever got any evidence of the so-called collusion. I remember they were even bringing in, I don't even know, and maybe Baty knows the answer to this one, because this one is what intrigued me. Baty, what was this deal? And I remember hearing the recorded phone calls, but the magician David Blaine, and he had somehow talked with Lee Kenworthy during this time, and it seemed like that was his trophy on the mantle somehow, was that he knew David Blaine, and David Blaine had felt for him, I guess, because his wife had passed and she was gone. But what was the connection with David Blaine and Lee Kenworthy?
I'm not sure exactly. That's something else that you can search through the record and try to find the details, but offhand I don't recall what they are. But apparently, somehow or another, I think through Shailene and her business activities, there was some connection to David Blaine and Lee Kenworthy, being such as he is or appears to be. He exploits other people. So he tried to make it sound like he and David Blaine were best buds, and tried to make that into a big deal. Just as during some of this litigation, he tried to hook up with Lee Merritt, a infamous civil rights attorney, and that didn't work out for him. The David Blaine thing didn't work out for him. At one point, Samantha Brown, his girlfriend, started harassing David Blaine, trying to make something of that connection, and I think it was reported that David Blaine might have got a restraining order against him, to leave him alone. But he's always played up any names that he happens to come in contact with to make himself look more important. And you take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, and I guess my main thing is, I know Shara, what is she doing? Nothing. I understand that she's back on the case with, Arlena Wills, who she's looking at 48 years in prison. She's going to help her somehow again. And I'm thinking, my God, y'all have helped her into the point of U.S. Marshals and FBI agents busting down the door, and she's been TPR'd. These are the things that we watch, and we warn people about them, and then others like this come out and promote the crazy. Then we're the ones who will later get the phone call or the message, you were right, can you help me? And by then, They have made such a nightmare that no magicians, Lee Merritt, anybody else, Johnny Cochran, there's no attorney or organization on earth that can buy your way out of this nightmare that they help create by promoting complete idiots. And it seems like Shara, even though she's like a hippie kind of thing, she's called here, talked to Melissa and I several times before. It's like she's just lost. And at first I think, my God, is she just that silly? Is she that dense? Is she just misled by these people? But the more you watch it, you can tell she's all about how many comments she gets, how many people are liking it, who she can poke the bear with, and then runs around like she really knows something when, in fact, she has absolutely no idea what she's talking about. And she'll say, well, I'm not an advocate, so I don't need to know anything. But anybody that's going to claim they're an investigative reporter, if you're going to be an investigative reporter, you should at least know the subject matter to which you are investigating in order to report. But not with this Shara Michelle. She is more of a tabloid. If there was a National Enquirer on crack, that's where she would fit in the best that I can possibly say. And it's just a string of failures and screw-ups. And then, just like with Jamie, now she's going back for a second bite of the apple and going to mess that up. And I'm not saying Jamie will win, Jamie will lose. I don't know. I hope she gets her life straight. I hope she's following her case plan. I hope Melissa's doing a good job advocating for her. But why go out and put things out there that will knowingly hurt a case? I haven't seen any of these cases where people so-called be loud and go crazy posting everything where it actually wins. They have no strategy of what happens when you poke the bear and the bear wakes up and comes after you. I'm not against poking the bear, but you better have a strategy for when that bear comes after you, because bears will eat you. And if you're going to poke the bear for your own self. But when you start poking the bear for these parents that are already, they're on the edge, they're psychologically beaten down, emotionally exhausted, financially bankrupt, they've been cut off from everything in their life. They don't know what happened. They're distraught. They're mad. They're confused. And then you go out and give them stupid information that gets them all hyped up, and a year later, they're terminated of their rights, and they're like, how do I fix it? There is no fix. That's the rarest thing in the world, to get an adoption undone. But yet they treat it like it's nothing. And Shara treats it like it's nothing. It's a game. It's a game for her to do, use her little jitterbug or Nokia 100-year-old phone and video that while she's calling around and digging in other people's stuff with a cop or whatever she's doing, and then she runs away from the fact, doesn't answer anything, and brings on sovereign citizens like the crazy Ken Scott guy. That guy's a nut job. We had him on for like 3 hours. We didn't have him on to have his point out there. We had him on, Maria and I did, for 3 hours, let him ramble on for 2.5 hours, and in the last 30 minutes, we pulled the rug out from under him and showed all of his stuff, from SWAT busting down his doors to the fact that he could never see his kids, and he's yelling about the gold fringe on flags and the Paris Accord and all of these other foolish things that had absolutely nothing to do with a parent that just had their child taken away Friday night and doesn't know what to do on Monday morning. But he goes into all this stuff, and it just confuses them. He just clouds their minds, messes them up, and they're bringing it in and associating Jamie Johnson with that, which I do not believe that Jamie is currently or recently has done anything with the sovereign citizen stuff. I remember that Jamie did a live with Orlena Wheels, and she was talking about David Strait, David Jose, and the affidavit and the bloody thumbprint, and Francis Amato was involved in that. And that was years ago. And I was all over him and said, look, the end of this is you all lose. You will all screw yourselves up if you don't get on the right track and stop now. And all I know is this: Orlena Wills has been TPR'd. Her kid is gone. She's facing 48 years in prison. Frances Amato has lost custody of her own child. Jamie has lost custody of her child. Now, I haven't seen Jamie do that since then. I wish that whenever she did her little, coming out and going to disclose, what she felt about what Shara did, that she would have came out boldly against this crazy sovereign citizen stuff, because it is just a death trap. It is a spiral down a damn hole. And I got some people that I've tried to help here that are calling me up or messaging me about, do you have Black's Law Dictionary number 9? I'm like, wait a minute, what are you doing? And it turns out they're digging in, and they want to learn this and they want to learn that so they can do some sort of a no jurisdiction due to maritime versus admiralty law. And I'm thinking, if you want to know what to do, read the North Carolina Court of Appeals for Chapter 7B cases. You'll see what's going to happen in your case if you read and understand them. First, read North Carolina Chapter 7B. Don't get to digging in and all these other crazy, goofy sovereign citizen things, because it will bury you. And then along comes Shara. There she is, promoting complete and total lunatic. And then she's just gone. She may come back in like she's doing now with Arlena Wills, but she'll screw you up and then just leave you hanging there. She'll be really sweet about how she does it. And I just don't, I can't figure it for the life of me. After today, I don't ever intend to say Shara's name ever again. She's just straight up stupid. Yeah. And if she was doing what Fran has done, and she was actively going after people, and David Jose and his crazy stuff, yeah, I'd stay on that. But generally, she picks out 1 or 2 victims and stays with them until they're utterly destroyed. So there's really no reason to be warning everybody about her, because anybody with any common sense could listen to one of her little podcasts or videos on Facebook and know that this is a woman you need to run away from.
Yeah. And, Randy, even after her inconsistencies were pointed out to her, showing her, things that has made a lot of trouble for somebody else, and hundreds of people have pointed that out to her. Everybody asked her to take it down, and she will not do it. She will not admit how wrong she was. And even with this Lee Kenworthy stuff, she's defended him for years, and then all of a sudden, these emails and posts and things, I guess, that Shaylin had made have come to light. And her whole defense is to that, well, I never saw the emails, before. I didn't know, but anybody in their right mind could just take a look at what she was doing with him and just see how crazy he was. And she will not apologize or, denounce, even that it's really came out there that Shaylin was in a lot of trouble domestically with him, and she just will not yield to it. It's just everybody else is wrong, and she tells everybody to F-O-F-F, when you make comments to her or whatever. She's telling them to F off. And so that's I don't know.
There might be a little analogy comes to my mind, in that Kent Hovind, the preacher I mentioned earlier, he went off to prison and got out in 2015, and he's been harping about being innocent throughout the whole ordeal and promising to spend the rest of his life harassing the government as if he'll get a pardon or have his criminal history vacated. And in Lee Kenworthy's case, we have him, his grandmother's dead, his wife's dead, he's lost his kids, and it looks like he's going to spend the rest of his life talking about how everybody's out to get him, this grand conspiracy. The police killed his wife, and they're out to get him, and he's on the run, and all this stuff. I was also going to mention earlier that the statistics are mind-boggling, which explains some of what we're seeing. Hello?
Yeah.
Still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're here.
That they talk about 400,000 children maybe being in foster care. And it's government. And there's lots of room for improvement in the system. And there are legitimate ways to accomplish that.
Yeah.
And so it's ripe for these promoters to see the opportunity to exploit their market share of those 400,000 or so cases. And that's what they're doing. When I first got involved, because of Kent Hovind and Brady Byram, his sovereign citizen expert, they were claiming they were going to take their scheme nationwide and exploit the child custody market. I don't know how deep Brady Byram got involved in that, but now I realize if not him, there's plenty of others like him doing just that. And if not the sovereign citizen angle, it's a different angle doing the same thing, hanging out a shingle saying, I can get your kids back tomorrow, put $500 up today, don't answer the door, record everything, don't cooperate, I got the magic words, whatever it is. And that's the market, that's the little sliver of the issue that I was attracted to back in 2016. And me and the people that have come to associate with me and I with them, we've handled, relatively speaking, a handful of these cases that illustrate so well what's happening on the wrong side of things. The Lee Kenworthy case, the Baby Hollum case, Arlena Willis, and some others, that they're just classic examples of how not to do it and what kind of people not to try and get help from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? That was another thing, because this is amazing me, Beatty, because I didn't understand the connection with Ken Hovind and DSS, and I never even heard the name of this Byram guy. I didn't even understand that. So that gives me a little better insight there. And you've watched what we've watched. I mean, I've watched that guy. I used to get blamed for being him, but it's Ronnie Davis, who's down in Florida. And this guy, at one point, because there's a lot of things I don't put out there, but at one point, all these women contacted me about Ronnie Davis. And I'm like, okay, how do you know him? They're like, we were in the compound, but we can't say we were in the compound. And I said, okay, the compound, what were you doing in the compound? And, of course, he's sovereign citizen all over the place, and Bears Law, they called it the golden ticket, like you're saying with the affidavit or the I'm a sovereign citizen. He had the golden ticket. And these women led me down. Several days I talked to them, but I couldn't mention their names. I couldn't come out with any of the information. And then after he got locked up again, I just kind of left it alone. But these women told me horror stories. This guy actually he got a young girl, pregnant. He was sleeping with the mother and her daughter in this compound. And that's what led to the kidnapping charges. And they just hit him with the kidnapping charge. You don't see, and then people will say, well, he didn't go to jail for sovereign citizen. He went to jail for kidnapping. Well, Al Capone went to jail for tax evasion, but he didn't go to jail for prostitution and murder and conspiracy. But the same thing was happening down there. And when these people started telling me these stories, and they're like, no, I was the one that did this, I was the one that did that, and how they were kidnapped, how they were there. And then they said, you need to check North Carolina. And I said, what do you mean North Carolina? This guy got nothing to do with North Carolina. Yeah, he did. Ronnie Davis had been in North Carolina, and I pulled it up. We researched it, and he'd been in jail here for beating and assaulting a woman. He served like a year in North Carolina. These jokers have been around for a long time. When I first got involved in this, there was a guy, his name was, and he looked really good on Facebook. He would tell you everything in the world. I didn't know any better. I sent him all my stuff FedEx. There was no charge or anything. I didn't pay him, but I thought, well, if it helps, it helps. And he was going to do a grand jury. And I thought it was going to be a real grand jury. Well, it's his own grand jury. It never happened. His name was Matthew J. Faulkner. And he looked like he was some sort of a U.S. attorney if you looked at him on Facebook. But it cost me a lot of time farting around and wasting a lot of time. And that's why now I try to help people when they very first get involved with a DSS case, because that first 30 days, every day you waste, my theory is it'll cost you a month in getting your child back. If you fart around and screw off the first 30 days, it'll cost you 3 years. It'll cost you 36 months trying to get your child back, because you blew certain deadlines with key hearings that have to happen that are appealable hearings, and then you're going through all these non-secures you can't do anything about. And I think that's where the public gets bewildered, is they think that, oh, if I get with Shara and she does a show for me, then I'm gonna get all this attention and they're gonna back off. But you cannot scare the government into leaving you alone. If you've done wrong, especially, they're not going to back off into leaving you alone. Now, if you catch them in some things that are so nefarious and awful and you got it on video and you can prove it, they may retaliate and then leave you alone. But most of these people that I'm seeing, a ton of them, and I recently had one that was a woman contacted me on Tuesday. She had a TPR hearing on a Friday, and told me she'd been on that CPS reality show. It's attorney Vince Davis pays this purple-haired chick to be on there interviewing him. But she's during the talk, she's talking to me for like 3 days, and then I said, look, whatever you got on Facebook, you need to take it off before that hearing tomorrow. And she said, well, I was on this CPS reality show. I never heard of it. I go over there and I look, and I'm like, holy Jesus. I go back there. I said, you need to have them pull it down. And she had like 2 days to get them to pull it down. They wouldn't pull it down. They wouldn't pull the interview down. I said, they're going to use that against you in court. Oh, no, if they do, it's going to be good because it shows my heart. I said, no, it's going to show you in cahoots with your husband that they told you to stay away from, because those are the allegations are against your husband. And I swear, this is one of those weird times when, because of COVID, the whole hearing was done in Texas on YouTube. So I'm sitting watching it, and I hope I die. They come in, and they're like, yeah, like we need to introduce IT expert, blah, 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 with Exhibit 9. And Exhibit 9 was the YouTube, the Facebook and YouTube video of her, colluding.
I remember that case, Randy.
And doing everything. And I was like, oh, my God. And I had told her, and sure enough, before it was over with, they ended up TPRing both of them. They terminated their rights. And I'm thinking, that really, the beginning of that hearing went well, but the next day, that came into play, and they put it in there, and they turned sour on the mother, and they destroyed the mother as well. They weren't going to terminate her rights, but they threw her right into the loop. And it was all because she did the wrong thing on Facebook. She listened to some idiots and followed down the wrong path, and it sent her down a path of destruction, just like Shara is sending people. And even whenever they don't want you doing things, as my understanding, Jamie didn't even want Shara out there blowing everything all over the place. She didn't even know what evidence she had collected from law enforcement, but there goes Shara. Got to be a hero, got to be important, and in order to have that meaning and to feel important and get her Facebook love, she blew it all out there, which is probably, destroyed a huge part of her case if she had one, and I would hope she had a means to a victory somehow. But those are the things that I don't understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what do you do? How are you going to make an idiot to behave like they have good sense? I mean, anybody looking at anything that Shara does, it's like, what is wrong with you? What, are you just locked up in a house, a lonely housewife not getting any attention at home, and you have no hobbies? Your only hobby is running around, being whoever you think you are this week, and you're going to write a song, write an article, be an investigative reporter, and do Facebook Lives to get your final validation out of this life because you've never done shit. I don't understand this at all, but here we are.
Well, and I want to say this because people have suggested that I haven't invited so-and-so to come and call in. I want to make this clear. Anybody can call on this show. We have never hung up on anybody. But our guest phone line is 563-999-3573. If anybody wants to call in, you're more than welcome to. Go ahead.
I would also mention that part of the context I see is that because it does involve literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of cases, and the government and people make mistakes, there are any number of cases you can go to where the parents or the guardians were able to collect millions of dollars because something was done wrong. And
yeah.
I think these promoters and these parents have dollar signs in their eyes because of the way they want to approach it, thinking, well, if somebody in California collected $6 million in a child custody case, that's my case. And it overwhelmingly, it doesn't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And there's another side to it, too. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of people out there get mad at me. They're like, well, Randy won't help me. Well, number one, I don't get paid to help anybody. I can choose who I quote-unquote help. And the only thing I do is help them understand what's going on and tell them how to get through it as fast as you possibly can. There is no there's no magic to it. There's no special piece of paper. There's no saying that you asking a judge for his oath is not going to change anything, or whether they're flying a regular flag or a flag with a gold fringe is not going to do anything, and some of them will get mad. But I will tell you that you get involved, and I was really bad for it in the beginning. You'd string yourself along, and you're listening to the person's story. And there is a difference. I learned this quick. There's a difference between a parent's story and a parent's case. And it's like Baty said earlier about getting these cases into court. You've got to have a case. You've got to have admissible evidence that would sway a jury, sway a judge, a prosecutor. But when you listen to the person's story, they're always going to be compelling. 99% of the time, they're embellishing their story, even if it's a really good case, and they're not going to tell you everything. And the thing that people know about me is, and some of them will get mad because I'll find something out later on, and I'm like, you know what? These are things you can't let pop up and jump up in the middle of it when we're trying to help you and walk you through and make sure you've got somebody to hold your hand when you want to jump off a bridge at 3 a.m, but you're not telling me the whole thing. You're not telling the whole story. So whenever you see these things, you don't really know what to do, but a lot of times we have to just back away because the people haven't been honest. And the other part of it is this. You'll have Sharon. She'll get everybody all fired up, or get Lee Kenworthy. Oh, yeah, I'm going to be good in court, man. I'm telling you, I'm really tough. Mitch Smith, who I like Mitch Smith. He's another one of these sovereign citizen guys, and he's got the most confidence I have ever seen. I actually like him. I like him. He's going to, and I listened to some of his older stuff where Mitch, before he was a sovereign citizen over the top, he was involved in real estate, and I listened to some of his older shows, and the guy had really good sense, but he lost his mind. He went mentally off the deep end is what he did, and sometimes I'm not sure if it's the cases or what happens, but people will lose their mind, and you'll think, well, they can handle it because they're really good with me on the phone. But then you're in court with them, and when they're on the stand, they are mush. Because they're before people who are paid to question you, paid to catch you, paid to tear you to shreds on that stand. And whenever they get up there, they're not the witness you thought they were going to be. So there's a lot more that plays into all of this stuff than than just going out there and Sharon making a song and writing a song about the bluebird or whatever the hell she's doing about this week, and doing crazy videos from bars and restaurants with Lee Kenworthy, or shared Facebook lives with Arlena Wills while U.S. Marshals are hell-bent on putting them away. And I'm going to tell y'all, if you're out there listening to this, some of you may not like it, but I can tell you, you've got Melissa Deagle. She's facing 140-some years in prison. You've got Arlena Wills. She's looking at 48 years in prison. She keeps saying 24, but we looked up the statutes, and it's 12 per count. And if they run them consecutively, I mean, you got to think: is it worth you losing your children and your liberty? You're going to be a jailhouse bandit. You're going to be like Leonard Pelletier and just sit in prison for the cause? Because the minute you go to jail, everybody has forgot you. That's what you need to keep in mind, and your children will have forgot you.
We have a caller.
Well, good.
On there, let's talk. You got something to say, or just you want to join in the conversation?
It's Sharon. Of course, I have a lot to say. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Is it tea time?
Hey, you guys, this is appalling what you're doing. I have a few things to say. Hold on one second. Okay, first of all, number one, I have never had sex with Lee Kenworthy. Randy Davis over there. You better be careful what you're saying about me, because it is actually slander. And if you think I'm
not slander. It's my opinion that the only reason that anybody would have anything to do with that idiot would be that.
Actually, it's not an opinion for you to say that I had sex with Lee Kenworthy. That's not an opinion.
No, I said it's my opinion. It's my opinion that would be one of the driving factors, because you're a lonely housewife and you have nothing else to do.
It's your opinion that I had sex with Lee Kenworthy. That's your opinion, really, Randy? You're showing a lot of class for a Native American, aren't you?
No, I'm showing what a Native American would call the truth, and that is that no Native American I know would associate with Lee Kenworthy. Nobody. What other reason would you have to
let me
believe
explain something to you.
Guy?
I covered a standoff that went viral. We all know this. Okay, when I went there, I don't know who he is when I went there. I was sent there. There were a couple people. I'm not going to discuss that part of it. I went to cover a standoff. I was the only journalist that was there on the scene at all. Nobody else was able to get over there, and I did. How does that equate to me having sex with Lee Kenworthy?
Well, I'll explain it to you how it does. Number one, there's some of us who didn't see a standoff. Well, I mean, if you ask me a question, you either want me to answer it or not, Sharon, but here's the deal.
Go ahead,
you said
Randy.
it's a standoff.
Sir.
Yeah, Sharon, you called it a standoff. Some of us saw it as a hostage situation with a madman who later went to a mental institute. Look,
you want to call
when
a
you
hostage,
say I was
you
called,
can call it a hostage.
Sharon,
yeah.
I'm not interrupting you. Why are you interrupting me? You don't want anybody else to say anything. You just want to have your opinion.
You don't want to talk. You don't take an hour to talk. Make a statement and let me answer to what you're saying. Be a little fair, Randy.
Do you have a question? If you'd like me to answer your last question, I will, or I'll give you another one. I'll give you a question.
It was not a hostage situation, Randy. Not at all. Okay?
Did he have children in the house?
He had his children in the house, Randy. How is that a hostage situation?
Because he had children in the house, and he lied about having children in the house, and he endangered the children with everything that he did. He endangered those children.
No, he did not.
He
the
did.
Officers that excuse me, you weren't there. Let me talk. The officers that surrounded the house with multiple rifles in their hands are the only ones that endangered the children that day, because he did not. He wasn't the one that had a weapon. He had no weapons. He committed no crimes. He was not threatening to harm anyone. He was not a threat of harm to anyone. And he was removed from his home. Now, I understand what you're talking about the children. That is a separate situation. If CPS comes, they do it all the time. They go in, they use the police, and they take children. But to remove Lee Kenworthy from his own home, which is definitely a violation of many things, to remove him from his home was very, very wrong. It was a violation of his civil commitment rights. And if you say it wasn't, Randy, you're full of it.
Well, here's what I'm saying. If that's a question to me, what I'm saying is this. They weren't there to get Lee Kenworthy removed from his home. They were there because DSS legitimately called them, and they had paperwork to be there. That's different.
They didn't have a report.
Like that are Sharon, you either ask the question and want the answer, or you just do like your show and talk to yourself.
You just said it. You just said it, that they weren't there to remove Lee Kenworthy. You just said it, dude. You just said it. Bomb. You just laid the bomb right out. Let me just explain something. If they come to my house because somebody has told them something was happening, and then I start acting crazy and becoming a lunatic inside my house with children in it, there's no telling where it goes from there. But they didn't go there with the intention of putting this guy. Listen, is that right?
Sharon.
What crime? What crime did he commit that day, Randy, that he was removed from his home? Tell me what crime.
They didn't charge him with a crime. Nobody said they charged him with a crime.
What crime?
It's not a crime to be.
Baty.
It's not a crime. Sharon,
Let's ask Robert
it's not
Baty.
a crime to be.
Right.
It's not a crime to be mentally ill. Did he go to a mental
Wait a minute.
institute?
It's a crime to remove. You cannot remove a person from their home against the civil commitment laws, Randy. If you have not destroyed property, if you are not threatening to harm anyone, if you have not physically harmed anyone, if harm is not imminent, and if you have not committed a crime, it is against the law to remove a citizen from the safety of their home per the Constitution. You know that, right? Do you follow the Constitution, Randy?
Yeah, I guess I know what it is.
They were there for a welfare check to check on the children. Why didn't he just
check on the
kids?
Correct, because
but he didn't let them do that. He had a standoff with the police and all that other stuff.
Standoff with the police. I know exactly what happened. Okay, I'm all the way on the inside of this whole thing. CPS knocked on the door shortly after 8 a.m. Lee did not want to open the door. He has the right to say no, as every person. Every single citizen has the right to say no, get a warrant, or let me get my lawyer and you can talk to my lawyer. Lee chose to say, let me get my lawyer and you can talk to my lawyer. I don't have a problem talking to you.
How did you end up over there? I mean, who called you into that day?
It's none of your business who called me. Why should I tell you who called me? It's none of your business. I'm a journalist.
What makes you a journalist? I want to know what makes you a journalist.
First of all, wait a minute. It wasn't Lee. If you're getting at Lee or Jamie or anyone else, I didn't know any of these people when I was over there. I didn't even know Lee's name when I stood in front of that house. If you go back and watch the video, I'm asking Sam, what is his name? What is the father's name? I don't even know his name when I stood there.
Okay, well,
you cannot say I know.
You're saying you're not going to reveal your sources because you're a journalist, but I'm asking you what makes you a journalist.
I will not reveal my sources because it was a politician. Why should I reveal my sources? Is this an interrogation? Is this an interrogation?
Yeah, it's an interrogation. You're being interrogated.
No, it's not an interrogation.
If you're a journalist, I'm an interrogator with the FBI because that's how close you are to being a journalist.
Go ahead, send the FBI.
What makes you a journalist?
I do not have to reveal my sources, first of all, who sent me there.
Okay. Can you tell us who made you a journalist?
I did not know Lee's name. I did not know Lee's name when I arrived. And here's another thing you did. You're telling the public that Lee or Robert Baty, one of you, I forget who said it, are telling the public that Lee killed his wife and killed his grandmother. Are you kidding me, Randy?
I think both of the women died while under his care. I think that's suspicious.
Appalling. It's absolutely appalling for you to even say that. It really is. You better.
I don't think it's appalling at all. I wouldn't let the guy babysit my dog. I'm just telling you, he's a lunatic, and I'm wondering why you keep promoting lunatics.
They died of natural causes. It was called an asthma attack. Lee did not cause her asthma attack. The house that triggered the allergy, triggering the asthma attack, is what caused the asthma attack. Lee did not murder his wife.
Did the asthma attack cause the domestic?
You don't murder somebody.
Okay.
Excuse me. You don't murder someone with an asthma attack. I have never heard of someone saying that person murdered that person with an asthma attack. I've never heard of that in my life.
Okay. What about these domestic violence charges that were currently pending as they were being evicted? The domestic violence charge you are referring to, excuse me, I heard the recording of Shay herself. You don't understand. I've had
countless hours having interviews with Lee Kenworthy. I have a lot of stuff recorded that I probably now should get back on the case and start airing what I have because of all of these lies going around about this whole case. I'm going to go back on the case. That's what I'm going to do. I was actually going to shut down for a while here, but I'm not going to do that. Now I'm going to go back on the case and start revealing what I know about this case. You're referring to something that happened. It was an argument that happened. It wasn't a domestic violence where he hit her. That's not what happened. It was an argument that happened. And I heard a recording.
Let me ask you this, Char.
I heard a recording.
This is a legitimate question. You say you're going back on the case, but there is no case. All those cases they're closed, are they not?
This is not a CPS
I mean, does he have an open pending CPS case, is there open pending anything? I mean, what case are you talking about when you say you're going back on the case?
Wait a minute.
Because what we're discussing is the things that happened while the standoff was going on and some of the shady stuff that has been brought to light. And, I mean, you have defended this guy for all this time, and then you've even said it over there. You didn't see Shaylin's emails and all this stuff that she was actually personally going through. And in my opinion, it sounded like she was a battered woman because he was doing all the battering, thus meaning the charges that he had at the time, before her death. And, there are some legitimate questions here. Why didn't he call sooner? I mean, your wife's having an asthma attack all day.
There we go.
I mean, why didn't he get care for her sooner or just drive her over to the hospital like Randy said? So whenever you say you're going back on the case, what kind of case is that exactly? You got a case number for that?
Asthma. I know.
I mean,
how
honestly, you're a journalist here. Do you have the case number for that? What case are you going on? Because we're just here discussing the stuff that's been going on and the crap that you've been saying over there on your page, and it is absolutely ridiculous. And guess what? I got another caller, and we're going to listen to them.
Are you going to call me names?
I didn't call you a name.
Are you going
You're live on air. Let's talk. Blog Talk Radio. You got something to say, caller?
Yeah, it was Marissa Hamilton that sent Shara to the standoff.
No, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
She alerted me. She's not the one that's. No, it's not. It's not.
And Lee had also just left Jamie Johnson's bed like 2 days before the standoff, and she'd been right here in Indiana. He'd been in Indiana trying to scam my daughter out of $500. So yeah, I fucking know.
Dang. I wonder if that's who I got the contract for.
This is Indiana Grandma, by the way.
Yes, and that's where the contract came. Because what do you think about that, Shara? The fact that Lee Kenworthy and Fran were all involved in this thing with these contracts where they were basically posing as attorneys and they were having people to sign legal agreements. They were signing authorizations to represent. You're an investigative reporter. And
Excuse me. Oh, no, I'm not. I don't investigate. Excuse me. I have actually stated it many times. I am not investigating every angle of this story. It's huge. There are too many angles on this story. I simply investigated the standoff and the death of Shaylin. That is all that I'm doing on this story. And everything you guys just said in your live here regarding Lee Kenworthy was very reckless.
It's not reckless. I think you did him. I think that you got some attention from him, and you were anxious for that
funny,
attention.
Really, it's very funny. And
everybody has the right to their own opinion, Char. That's the thing of it, okay? And you can't handle that. It's called freedom of speech. Learn that first, journalists, okay?
Don't tell me to learn, ma'am. I have nothing to learn from you. I promise you.
Yeah, well,
to accuse me,
you know what?
To accuse me, bye-bye.
Shara needs to learn to knit.
I think she did him.
I think
she did him. Yeah, I think she did him. She did. Look, an investigative journalist that doesn't understand that they need to figure out if their client that they're representing, the subject matter, to the public about, they don't know whether he's credible or not. They don't look into any of that because there's too many angles. There's no angles here, folks. This is a maniac that was looking for attention. He didn't want to lose his kids or her kids or whatever the situation was. And he jumped out there, and this idiot ran over there and gave him some credibility and some attention. And that's all Shara does. That's all she does.
I didn't get to talk to her.
I guess she didn't really want to debate you. She said she wanted to have some tea
she had an
time
opportunity
with
to
the boss
speak with
man.
you, and she was just wanting to be all over Randy for his opinions, which he's entitled to his opinions, about what we've been discussing.
I was hoping that the three of us could sing happy birthday to her, because it's reported that tomorrow will be her 56th birthday.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yep.
Happy birthday,
I'm getting
Sharon.
some crochet needles out. Send her some yarn.
I was also going to mention, if we ever got a one-on-one going, that she and I would not dispute that asthma was the approximate medical cause of her death. The reason I say Lee Kenworthy killed her is because he's responsible for the circumstances subsequent to her passing out and leading up to her passing out. During the hours before that and the years before that, which involved his abuse and exploitation of her physically and mentally. That's why I say that he killed her.
Yeah.
And just like with his mother, his grandmother, apparently the medicine she was taking that had death as a side effect, potentially, is what killed her. But Lee was in charge of the circumstances that led up to that, which we may never know the complete details on.
Yeah.
So there's certainly sufficient evidence to conclude, to form the opinion that Lee's responsible for the death of both of those women. Now, it may be that for purposes of a wrongful death suit, which we talked about earlier, that the statute of limitations is run, and that no prosecutor would think the evidence sufficient beyond a reasonable doubt to convict them. So it's a matter that Lee and Shara and others have brought to us via social media, and they have no platform upon which to complain that we disagree with their conclusions about the matter.
Exactly. And those are key words here. We're allowed to disagree with what she's putting out there and what she says and the way she's presenting, and we're allowed to disagree. We're entitled to our own opinions.
I was also disappointed that she asked that question about what crime did Lee commit on Memorial Day 2018. It's as if she's got her ears closed, even for just what's happened today, in me trying to make it clear to her that was not the question. She claimed the prosecutor confirmed that no crimes were committed. That's not what the prosecutor did from the record I presented before this show started. And that's why I try to keep things simple as I can, because you get beyond that and see how they treat the simplest of matters, the prospect of resolving the weightier matters is pretty slim. So what does it take for Sharon and I to agree that all the prosecutor said was that he was not charged with any crimes, and that when Shara says the prosecutor said there were no crimes is a misrepresentation?
Exactly.
How complicated can she make that? She deflects, she evades, she goes off into the weeds, but it's hard to get her tied down. And, I've done it over and over again last couple of years and a half, and she's good at what she does, and that she just lets it rolls off her back, and she goes on and does what she does, and she is what she is. And I appreciate the spectacle she made of herself in calling in. I was sitting here enjoying the show she was putting on, and I hope the audience appreciates that.
Well, we have another caller. You're live on air. Let's talk with Blog Talk Radio. Do you want to join in the conversation or have something to say?
I sure do. My name is Shar, not Shara, just to let you know. I've been mistaken out there because of the way that her name is and my name is for her. I am not her. But I want to speak on the beginning of the Lee Kenworthy. I was on it right away, and I know Randy had come in right away. We tagged him in. And so was CJ and a couple other people, even reporters that were on the web. And the authorities were contacted right away. Now, I'm going to tell you what they say that can happen in New Jersey. Even though they had come to the door and he refused, his actions after that put the kids in danger, which gave them the right to make the call that they did. There's a difference here. Just because he refused at the door, it was his confrontation and the way he handled it, which it kind of validated the caller that called in on him. I think people are missing that point. So they were saying at that point in time that Lee's children were in immediate danger by Lee's reactions. You understand that part?
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference. So, yes, did he have a right to deny? Yes, but it was the confrontation and his demeanor that he handled it that showed that he may be off a little bit and there was some kind of distress in the household, and that made the right of those officers to take stand. There's a difference in
after
this.
all, he was taken to the hospital after that for the mental eval, correct? I mean, he voluntarily put himself there.
Absolutely.
So I don't understand her argument at all that this was not a legitimate thing and the children were in danger and, they needed to be secured and safe from, and,
If you listen to Shara, she was not there. She didn't know who they were. And obviously she wasn't watching the live the whole time we were. She came in towards the end of it, was standing outside the whole time, was not seeing what was going on in the inside during the time of her reporting. She was not. She had not a clue. So all of us that were watching it, we were actually correcting her because she had everything wrong as she was reporting. If anybody wants to go watch it, you surely can. And you will see how everybody was trying to correct the situations that were happening. Or there were people on the phone giving the officers the rights of Lee, defending Lee for real. And Lee really had that in the beginning. It was his actions that caused the alarm himself at that given time. It had nothing to do, and that does give the state the right to come in as an alarm. As they were saying, it was Lee's own actions that had caused that at that point in time for them to come in and do what they wanted to do.
Mhm. I agree. What do you have to say about that, Robert?
Well, I don't see anything to disagree with that. I was thinking along the lines of, such as we've been talking about, what the movement recommends in so many cases about don't open the door, don't talk to him, blah, blah, blah. Yes, everybody has certain rights. You don't have to open your door. You don't have to talk to them. You can do all sorts of things. But that doesn't mean they're going to go away and leave you alone. There are consequences. They're going to come in, or somehow or another, they will remove the children, and you'll see the judge in 2 or 3 days or whatever the local law is about how you can go about getting them back. So, yes, that's why some of these advocates, promoters, whatever you want to call them, are so successful. They talk about your rights. You ought to exercise them. And the ones that don't have their children taken are more apt to be the ones that open the door and they come in and they check the place out and it's just fine, and whatever they heard that caused the visit is unfounded and they go their way.
Yeah.
It's complicated, and each case, can have its peculiar facts. And I'm glad she explained it that way, that we might have been too superficial in our discussion earlier. But yes, Lee's reactions and attitude and what he did aggravated the situation.
Not only that, but before that, he was on live all night long. And that's when somebody called in on him and had concerns for the children, was by his actions, as Randy was saying. When you go out there live and you start spewing things out here, then other people catch on to this. Don't think that they won't pick up that phone and call on you. Then think, listen to how they're speaking right now. We have a concern for these children because of the actions of this parent right here, right now. You need to look at this. It happened.
One of the theories going around is that Lee actually orchestrated this, and there seems to be some validity to it, and maybe some specific things he said leading up to it, that this is just the sort of theater he was looking for. The prosecutor's statement says a family member called in, and I can see where Lee, in moving into that house and his activities involving his family, might have built up to the point Lee knew someone in his family was going to call. And so he might very well be charged with having orchestrated and getting what he bargained for.
I agree with Baty on this, and I thought all along it could have been a thing planned with Fran and Lee Kenworthy. And I'm not kidding you, because that is, we have had so many times we have seen Fran do this stuff. Look at Orlando Wills. She's on the phone with Fran while U.S. Marshals are banging on the door. Then Dana Williams. Fran did the same thing. Maria and I helped Dana Williams' 2 twin daughters keep from being sent to Croatia. We had 5 days. Told her, you got to take down your Facebook page, stay away from Fran. She didn't. She went right back over there to Fran, started yelling and screaming. All of these people have something in common, though. They didn't win their own cases. And they don't have any cases that they point to where they help be successful with reuniting with their children. They just don't have any. And they think that, we'll get on here and we're really loud and obnoxious. And then once you go to jail as their client, they just forget about you. You don't see Fran over there talking about Orlena Willis anymore because there's no backing up on that. And we warned Orlena Willis. We warned her. She still probably believes in Fran, but look at what's happening. And there's something in common here. Lee Kenworthy, what happened? He went to a mental psych ward. What happened with Orlena Willis? Her lawyer just filed a Rule 11. He's saying she's incompetent. She can't handle this mentally. What happened with Melissa Deagle? Same thing. You see this all the time where it gets to the point where the legal world can't deal with them because they get so far mentally out there. And I understand it is very stressful. It is absolutely awful. And what I thought, and this is something, too, I'll bring up so y'all know what's coming up. And for some of you that don't know, and some of you don't even know this, but when my situation first happened, it was not a situation with DSS. Everybody thought it was, but it was 9 cops in unmarked cars with little black cell phones that came to knock us out. And it's because I had inadvertently, because of my Croatan Indian status, and here's where it's going to matter. I'll kind of give it a breakdown, and Melissa knows what we're up to and why I've been kind of quiet. But if you've been watching the rallies, you see Joe Biden here in North Carolina in Lumberton, and he's talking about the Lumbee Indians. They're going to get recognition. I'm going to push it. And then you see Trump. He does it one time, then he comes back and does another one in Lumberton the other day, and specifically says, I'm gonna recognize the Lumbee Indians. Why does that matter to me? Here's why it matters, and here's why it matters to Trump and Biden. Because there's 50,000 supposed Lumbee Indians in North Carolina. It's a key swing state. They both have to win. So why is that important? Because what got me in this mess in the first place is I was digging into my Croatan Indian history. And if y'all want to Google it, you Google Lumbee Indians or Lumbee and Croatan, and you're going to find that these guys down there who did not exist until 1956, the Lumbee Indians did not exist until 56. They started out as being the Croatan Indians, as a part of the Croatan Indians, which is my tribe. And essentially over the years, they have eliminated us. And they had my grandfather's writings at what's called the LRDA. So I started digging, and I dug on the Kahari Indians here, who's another 501 like them. And whenever I did, I found USDA fraud. I found HUD fraud, Nahasta fraud. I went in, did these secret meetings with New York attorneys here in North Carolina that didn't know who I was. I filmed it. It hit the news here, WREL-TV, Kahari fraud, Choharie. Pull it up. You'll see me in the videos on the breaking news. You'll see them using my videos to expose it. Well, here's where it matters. Now, all of a sudden, every politician wants to recognize these jokers, and they had our stuff. It's going to be a bigger battle. But here, the reason I bring that up is because when this happened to me, they came to shut me up because local politicians, Senator Brent Jackson, for example, he had got a $1 million USDA subsidy for as a grant for his son, for a young farmer, and he was in meth rehab at the time. In meth rehab. The jail here that they ended up putting me in, that I had to write a writ of habeas to get out of, it was built with USDA money. The head of the 501c3, and that's why I understand these nonprofits like Fran and Kentworthy were trying to rape people with. I had their 990s. I understood it. I had their governing documents, all of their resolutions, their bylaws, everything that created them, and I had their financials. I had them. So the head of that place was a fired USDA meat inspector that was a felon, and then the chief of the organization was USDA, a felon for drugs. And I'm thinking, and they were still getting USDA money. So I went in, I busted it out, and Katie Pavlich and James O'Keefe, Katie Pavlich is Fox News and Town Hall editor, townhall.com. They made me a journalist. They saw all the stuff in 2012, made me a journalist. I started writing on it. So what I messed up in the beginning was I poked the wrong bear, didn't even know the bear I was poking. And once they came out after me, they had to have a reason to come after me. So then they said, no, we were assisting DSS. There was no DSS there for 3 hours. I videoed it all. They set me up with video stuff, everything, taught me how to do it. And I went in, I captured everything, and because I poked the wrong bear, they came after me. So once they messed with my daughter, I said, you know what, forget about all that. I'm getting my daughter back, but I'll make sure they never do this again. And my belief was, my God, CPS takes kids away from innocent parents. Do they? Sure they do. But they also, I left no room in my head for, well, maybe sometimes they take them legitimately, because that's not what happened with me. And we did win. We won the only FERPA situation in 43 years. There's a write-up in it in the Fayetteville Observer. You can Google Fayetteville Observer, Randy Davis. Just put those words in. You'll pull it up. You'll see it. It's not make-believe. But I thought, my God, everybody in the world gets tormented by these people, and for no reason. And that hurt me for a long time, because I didn't look to see if there was any flaw. And that's what Sharon is doing over there. She doesn't care whether Lee Kenworthy may have aided in the death of his wife or his grandmother, which I believe there's good reason to believe. I would not let him babysit, like I said, my dog, because the guy's a lunatic.
I'm going to defend that. I'm going to defend that a little bit, Randy, only because of their story that you just put out, that you just said of yourself, on you not knowing and you being the way that it happened to you by poking the wrong bear. Now I'm going to give him the little bit of a benefit of a doubt here. Maybe he poked the wrong bear here in New Jersey. And that's how his whole thing started too. But he handled it differently, okay? That's the whole point in this also, is how it's being handled.
Yeah, you might be right, but here's the thing about it, and my point is not about Lee Kenworthy and why he may or may not have done anything, but it's about Shara. Shara decides, and you heard what she said, there's many prongs or many little leaves on this tree, many angles that it goes. The problem is Shara fixes in on whatever it is, whoever it is, and she draws her own conclusion as to whether it's going to benefit Shara. And if it's going to benefit Shara, she turns a blind eye to any other thing about it. If there's something negative, she doesn't want to see it. She doesn't want to hear it. She doesn't want to talk about it. And that's not what you do if you're truly investigative reporting on anything. You need to know, is there a possibility that this happened?
Mm-hmm.
Have I asked them about it? But she never asked about emails. She never asked about domestic violence. She never brought up anything about the deaths and went into the fact, well, for those who may say this, what do you say about the death of your wife or your grandmother? She doesn't look for anything else because she's not a reporter. She's a hack. She is a washed-up hack that doesn't get what she needs at home, and for whatever reason, she scours Facebook, and she looks for situations to inject herself, just like that. And I believe Indiana Grandma. I can tell you, Indiana Grandma has been straightforward. She does help people. She's solid. And when she says that her daughter was scammed out of $500 by Lee Kenworthy, they were. Because if I remember correctly, that's where I originally got the contract, where Lee Kenworthy had screwed the girl over. And why?
And that's true. I will verify. I will verify that. I have to verify that. That's true.
Yeah, and he was getting
I got it too. That is true. Yes.
It looked like a legal agreement, an agreement to represent, an attorney-client type situation where he was essentially practicing law without a license, and he was practicing law with no sense whatsoever. He just had a piece of paper. He goes out there, and to drive cross country, we've seen it with Fran. You know, she took $5,000 from the one woman, but another person got in touch with me, and it was $10,000 she took. Fran made a tremendous amount of money. It's like Baty said. These people see there's 400,000 children out in foster care. All of them should not be in foster care. I can tell you that. But they will exploit anybody in that situation. They will play on your fear, play on your shame, play on anything that they can. And if you got any money, they will drain you completely dry. And then you don't win, and they just go away. And like David Ojay and David Strait do, what do? They tell you filed the stuff wrong. They give you the stuff to do it. Then they turn around and tell you didn't do it right. There is no right way to file a bloody thumbprint and claim that, the fringe on the flag and the oath of the judge is why you didn't win. You're not going to win that way. You are not going to win that way, folks. I'm telling you. It hasn't happened in a federal court. It hasn't happened in a DSS court. You essentially have no rights in there to start with. As sad as that is the absolute truth, and I've been in a bunch of them. I've had my phone searched in there. I've had every constitutional right you can think of personally violated when it wasn't even my case. But I have seen it. I've watched it. I've watched the pain in the parents' faces. And that part has to change, whether it's courtroom cameras, whether it's valid transcripts or court watchers that are paid by the state to make sure that doesn't happen. That has to change. It can't just be railroading parents in the name of saving the children. You destroy their family, and thus you destroy the child and the family. That has to change. But all of these cases are not that way. It's not that way. And I see Kentworthy as having, Baty just told us, he had a long history of domestic violence with Sharon. And you have that kind of situation. You have a pending one then. There's a U-Haul out in the yard. There's time differences that are disputed with the cops, and whenever he called the cops or called EMS, and then the woman just is mysteriously dead on the floor. And if you don't provide aid to someone in an asthma situation after you've just triggered them or whatever, and he's been putting her under that kind of stress, I can see where she would die, and he would have just allowed it to happen, maybe not did it physically, but not giving aid, it is reason to believe that this guy wanted out of the situation, and it looks like it had got to that point. I stand by that. I stand by my statement, and she can sue me for slander, libel, whatever. I'll write it and put it out there if I ever get out of Facebook jail, but I'll put it out there. I think she was screwing him because I can't think of any other reason why a woman would be around that idiot.
We've got another caller. You're live on air. You got something to say?
Hi, it's Maria.
Hey. And what do you think about this podcast this evening?
Well, I think with Lee Kenworthy, I think we have to look at the whole scope, that this is a guy who has serious mental health issues. I strongly feel like the family failed to step in, but at the same time, she stuck around. She kept going back. She didn't have to. And I've read the reports with the law enforcement, and they were saying on Baby's page that he prevented them from coming in the house, or that was the rumor for a long time. And that was never the case. They just asked him to back up. It's hard to know when she collapsed and when he called 911. It doesn't, we'll never really know that. That's only something that'll probably, unless Lee has blurted it out, the reports don't give that indication.
Mm-hmm.
So, and
Maria, while you're on here, this is something important, and I got to see, because I haven't gotten my monthly stipend of cigarettes from Baty. I didn't know if you got yours or if I've been kicked to the curb.
No. Unfortunately, I don't do a whole lot for Baty. I get my stipend from you.
Right on.
They go out.
You know how that works. You know how that works. We got to go out there. What is it that we do? We steal cars and strip them, crush them, and sell them. And
yes,
what else?
according to the Hulk, the Yugoslavian wonder over there, Perry Mason, the Hulk, Honey Perry. Yeah, that's what we're doing, making meth and selling crushed cars that I steal and you help me get the title for.
Catalytic converters.
I mean, when you look at all of these people that are in this movement that have been milking people for the family, taking money from them, most of them have mental illnesses. Most of them don't have their own children. Most of them need to be in jail. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with the bunch. All of them.
You
just don't
something else that's
understand how
weird
these
about
parents fall for it.
Maybe this is why Sharon got mad at me, but this is one of the characteristics that I picked up on most of these people, is there's all this crazy sexual perversion. I'm serious. Neely Petrie, she was running around screwing everybody. Kirk Pendergrass, he was pitching on both sides. He was pitching and catching. John Gentry was arguing with him, trying to convert him back over. Then you got all of them trying to sleep with everybody on the air.
Even when
I don't even understand.
Every time you turn your head, this one's being raped, that one's being sexually assaulted, this one was held against. I mean, it's like it's a constant thing.
Yeah, and then don't forget, y'all, for those of y'all that don't know, I had very little understanding of any of this, and then there was an invite for me to speak in Georgia at it's a woman who Melissa Foster actually worked with, Senator Nancy Schaefer. So we go down, Melissa, myself, a grandmother from here in North Carolina, we go down there. Brian Kenner's there. But listen to who all was there. There was Neely Petrie, there was John Gentry, there was Terry LaPointe, there was Connie Reguli, there was Melanie Lee Herron, and there was Lotus Justice. I pulled Ted Fogg off Lotus Justice and threw him out because he just slapped her to the ground after they were arguing about who was the biggest alpha male. And then I look back over time and look, Neely, she's been arrested, got Amber Alerts. You got Ted Fogg. He's went into, I don't know where he's went into hiding. You got Lotus Justice on videos with tear gas canisters coming through the basement of the house, and then she's on the house with her legs up in the air and people, firing tear gas up there and whacking her. You got Pendergrass went off, and he's got charges. And you got Hallett. He's destroyed people's cases, and now he's all over the Daily Beast and QAnon and all of this other stuff. And it's like, my God, Jesus, what in the world? What kind of thing did I get drug into? And that's what we fight against every day, is trying to get a parent not to go down that road, because we've already seen what's down there. I mean, it's going to get you, but it is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah, whenever they make these promises and say, send me $50 for a Zoom class like Fran, or get $5,000 from your Bolivian elderly parents, and I'll come and take it from you, me enslaving. I just can't figure out why people are so gullible. And a part of me wants to say, if they're that stupid, they probably are not capable of raising a child to start with. So why bother if they're so squirrely to think that they can put a bloody thumbprint and get their children back?
Yeah. Folks, we are out of time. It's been a great evening, and I would like to thank Robert Baty for coming on the show, and thank all of our callers for calling in. And happy birthday, Shara. And guess what, folks? Just turn it off. Turn it off. Blockers, shut it down. It's no good. We'll see you guys next time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hit it. Shara, put drives on negative attention. She doesn't care.
Rev it up.
Blocker.
Rev it up. Good night, guys.
Rev it up.
Good night.
Rev it up.
Good night.